Wednesday, October 4th, 2017. Before the sun rose, 8 pickup trucks roll out of a tiny village in Niger called Tongo Tongo. Inside are U.S. Army Green Berets and their Nigerian partners. Their mission? Capture a brutal, high-ranking ISIS commander operating in the area. But only a few miles outside the village, the hunters become the hunted. Gunfire erupts from the tree line. The rear trucks are shredded in seconds, outnumbered, outgunned. The convoy slams to a halt, enemy rounds cutting through the air. Radios crackle, no air support, no backup, and no way out. What began as a routine patrol has turned into a desperate fight for survival. This is the tragic true story of how a small detachment of U.S. Special Forces faced a massive ISIS assault on African soil and refused to die quietly.
Tonight, US-backed Kurdish forces have achieved a significant milestone in the fight against the so-called Islamic State, today declaring the group totally eliminated.
By 2017, ISIS had lost much of its territory in the Middle East, but its violence had spread across Africa.
It's now established, and it's spreading everywhere. Now it's right here, in Somalia.
In the remote Sahel region, a brutal offshoot called ISGS, Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, was rising fast. Led by Adnan Abu Walid al-Sahrawi, ISGS waged a campaign of terror across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, raiding villages, burning homes, and slaughtering any civilians who resisted. In the Sahel, surrender wasn't survival, it was slavery. The group's fighters kidnapped aid workers and executed villagers accused of cooperating with government troops. Each attack was designed to sow fear and control through chaos. That's where Dundu Shefu came in. Once a cattle herder, he'd become one of ISGS's most aggressive field commanders. His cell was tied to cross-border raids and kidnappings, including the 2016 abduction of American aid worker Jeffrey Woodkey in Niger. Shefu's men were known for striking quickly, then vanishing into the desert. To US and Nigerian intelligence, Shefu wasn't just another militant. He was a key link in ISIS's African network. Stopping him meant cutting off one of the region's most dangerous insurgent cells. That's why, on the morning of October 4th, 2017, a small U.S. Special Forces detachment and their Nigerian partners rolled out toward the village of Tongo Tongo, hunting a man whose cruelty had already left a trail of blood across the desert.
Okay, so Tongo Tongo. Is it somewhere in Nigeria or something, bro? Come on, alright.
The hunt for Dundu Shefu had begun. Before dawn, 11 Green Berets from Operational Detachment Alpha 3212, 3rd Special Forces Group, rolled out from Camp Wahlam, their 8 pickup trucks rattling across the hard desert floor. Riding with them were about 30 Nigerian soldiers, men who had trained side by side with the Americans for months. Their mission on paper sounded routine, a civil military reconnaissance patrol near the Mali border. But everyone in those trucks knew the truth. They were going after Shefu. The plan had once included helicopter support and overhead surveillance, but bad weather grounded the air assault, leaving the ground convoy to push on alone. Worse, the unarmed ISR drone that had been watching Shefu's suspected camp was reassigned to another mission, stripping the team of their only set of eyes in the sky. Captain Michael Perezzini, ODA 3212's commander, and Team Sergeant First Class Brent Bartels didn't like it. They were operating hundreds of miles from the nearest backup, and French air assets weren't on immediate alert. Both men voiced their concerns about proceeding without drone coverage or a quick reaction force, but higher-ups ordered them to continue.
You need air support. I mean, you need eyes in the sky. Okay, let me see. I mean, they are special forces, right, bro?
They rolled north through the scrubland, scanning every ridge and tree line. By mid-morning, the convoy entered the remote village of Tongo Tongo to refuel and meet with the local elders. What should have been a quick stop began to drag. The elders stalled the meeting, insisting on more discussion. Outside, soldiers on security noticed motorcycles racing out of town, raising uneasy glances. They might be couriers, warning fighters in the bush. After nearly an hour of delay, Captain Perezzini gave the order to move. The convoy pulled out, dust swirling behind them. They'd barely cleared the edge of the village when the first bursts of automatic fire cut through the air.
I'm getting nervous, trust me. I am getting nervous. Oh. That was a lot.
As the convoy rolled south out of Tongo Tongo, the morning air was split by automatic gunfire. Bullets ripped through the dust and tore into the rear vehicles. Within seconds, the patrol was pinned down. The Green Berets and Nigerian soldiers had walked straight into a well-planned ambush. The first bursts were sporadic, probing, then came a surge of mortars, machine guns, and small arms fire from every direction. Captain Michael Perezzini, realizing they were caught in the kill zone, ordered his men to dismount and return fire. Under covering fire, he led a small assault element forward with 4 Nigerian soldiers and managed to neutralize several attackers. For a moment, it looked like they could punch through. But when the smoke cleared, they saw the real threat. Beyond the trees, nearly 100 ISIS fighters were closing in. Motorcycles racing ahead, while pickup trucks with mounted machine guns and mortars followed close behind. This wasn't a hit and run, it was a coordinated assault. Perezzini raced back to the convoy and gave the order to withdraw. But the team was stretched thin across rough terrain, and the movement broke down into chaos. 3 Green Berets, Staff Sergeant Brian Black, Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Johnson, and Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright stayed behind to cover their retreat. In seconds, they were cut off. The 3 men fought back with everything they had, maneuvering through the brush, firing controlled bursts, shifting positions to hold the line. But the enemy kept closing. Brian Black was hit first, killed instantly while laying down suppressive fire beside a vehicle. Wright and Johnson pulled him behind cover, returning fire, but there were too many. Outnumbered and nearly surrounded, they made the agonizing decision to fall back. They sprinted across the open savanna, gunfire chasing them through the dust. Then Jeremiah Johnson was hit and went down. Dustin Wright turned, saw his teammate wounded and exposed, and didn't hesitate. He ran back into the fire, dragging Johnson to cover, returning fire until his rifle ran dry. Both men were killed where they stood. Under the laws of war, the wounded are supposed to be spared. But ISIS...
Man, going there without air support was a fucking mistake, trust me. I mean, going there without eyes in the sky was a fucking mistake. I mean, I am no soldier, but this is common sense, bro. Come on. Yeah.
His fighters followed no laws, no code, no mercy. Later footage showed both men executed at close range. Their sacrifice bought the rest of the team precious minutes, the only reason anyone survived what came next. As Captain Perezzini's convoy fought to break contact, Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson stayed near the rear, laying down suppressive fire with his M240 machine gun. When it jammed, he switched to his rifle and kept fighting through the storm of gunfire. The team pushed south through scrub and open grassland, trying to regroup. Dust clouds and muzzle flashes surrounded them. The ambush had shattered the formation. Trucks scattered, radios crackling, men firing from the beds as they drove. In the chaos, Johnson's vehicle and 2 Nigerian soldiers were cut off from the main body. Their truck took direct fire. The driver's side was fully exposed. With rounds punching through the thin metal, they had no choice but to bail out and run on foot. Behind them, ISIS fighters swarmed the abandoned vehicles, recognizing the American gear and zeroing in. Dozens of motorcycles kicked up trails of dust as they fanned out to chase the 3 men across the savannah. The 2 Nigerian soldiers were overtaken first. Johnson kept running, his endurance, training, and determination carrying him nearly a mile through the heat and dust until he reached a low rise, crowned by a single thorn-covered tree. That tree became Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson's Alamo. Alone, winded, and nearly surrounded, he dropped behind the roots and went to work. Armed with his M2010 sniper rifle and a few magazines, Johnson fired with precision, each shot slowing the enemy's advance and forcing them to stay low. He had no radio, no communications, and no heavy weapons. Still, he fought relentlessly. Eventually, an ISIS technical armed with a heavy machine gun closed to within 100 yards and unleashed a burst that ripped through his position. LaDavid Johnson died alone, his weapon still in his hands, hit 18 times before it fell silent.
Fuck. So these people were outnumbered, trust me. They were outnumbered. I mean,
For ODA 3212, the ambush wasn't over. As Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson made his final stand to the north, the rest of the team was still being hunted across the open bush. Dust and gunfire followed them for miles. Captain Michael Perezzini and Team Sergeant Brent Bartels tried to hold the convoy together, 7 Americans and their Nigerian partners still fighting to stay alive. The trucks weaved through the scrub, engines roaring, men firing from the beds as they drove. Rounds smashed through windshields, tires blew. Bartels was hit, but he kept shouting coordinates over the radio, directing fire as he bled. Then, amid the chaos, Captain Perezzini was struck by enemy fire and fell from the back of a moving truck. Without hesitation, his teammates slammed the brakes and turned back, spinning in the dirt as rounds snapped overhead. They jumped out, grabbed their wounded team leader, and dragged him aboard under heavy fire. That act saved his life, but it also slowed their retreat, giving the ISIS fighters time to close in again. Realizing they were about to be overrun, the Green Berets sent a final radio message, destroyed sensitive equipment, and began texting their loved ones goodbye. As a last desperate hope, Captain Perezzini tried to send messages through a secure military chat system, typing, "We need help now or we aren't going to make it. Tongo Tongo is a bad village." Elsewhere in Africa, other U.S. Special Forces teams received the distress calls and begged for permission to launch a rescue. One group even boarded a helicopter without orders, but was forced to turn back before takeoff. Nearly an hour later, the sound they'd been praying for finally came. 2 French Mirage 2000 jets tore across the horizon, screaming low over the desert. The shockwaves alone scattered what was left of the ISIS force. Moments later, an American drone feed came back online, tracking enemy movement and directing French aircraft onto fleeing militants. By the time French commandos reached the area, the fight was over. They found the survivors, exhausted, bloodied, and out of ammunition, but alive. 4 Americans, 4 Nigerian soldiers, and 1 interpreter had been killed. 3 of the fallen, Brian Black, Jeremiah Johnson, and Dustin Wright, were recovered that day. Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson was still missing. For the next 48 hours, French and Nigerian forces scoured the area while U.S. drones circled overhead. 2 days later, they found him, a mile from the ambush site, near that lone thorn tree where he had made his stand. His weapon lay beside him. He had fought until the end.
they needed the air supports.
When the guns finally fell silent in Niger, the shockwaves reached all the way home. 4 Americans were dead: Staff Sergeant Brian Black, Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Johnson, Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright, and Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, along with 4 Nigerian soldiers and an interpreter. What began as a low-risk patrol had become the deadliest firefight for U.S. Special Forces in Africa since Mogadishu. In the following days, French and Nigerian forces helped recover the fallen, secure the site, and bring the survivors home. But as the bodies returned to Dover, the questions began. How could a dozen Americans end up surrounded, outnumbered 10 to 1, with no air cover, no drone overwatch, and no quick reaction force in reach? The Department of Defense launched a full investigation. When the first internal report circulated, it placed much of the blame on Captain Michael Perezzini, the detachment commander of ODA 3212. Headquarters claimed he had misrepresented the mission. filing it as a simple reconnaissance patrol instead of a direct action raid targeting Dandu Shafo. But when the evidence was reviewed, that narrative didn't hold up. Communications logs and testimony showed the truth. The orders to pursue Shefu came from higher headquarters in Chad and Niamey, not from Perezzini or his team. He had actually objected to the mission more than once, warning that they had no drone coverage, no QRF, and were too deep in enemy territory.
That was a problem, come on. Yo, I'm sorry for interrupting though, yo.
He was overruled and ordered to proceed. Even after the investigation cleared him of wrongdoing, the Army issued him a formal reprimand for failure to assess risk. The Special Forces community pushed back hard. After an appeal and outside review, the reprimand was rescinded, and Perezzini's name was cleared. He had done exactly what a commander should do, fight to protect his men, then fight to bring them home. But the fallout didn't stop there. When the news reached the US, the ambush exploded into national headlines. 4 American Green Berets killed in Africa, and few even knew US troops were there. Reporters pressed the Pentagon, Congress demanded answers, and the story reached the White House. President Donald Trump's condolence call to Maisha Johnson, LaDavid's widow, became a flashpoint after Congresswoman Frederica Wilson publicly accused the president of making insensitive remarks. The controversy dominated headlines for weeks, drowning out the bravery of the men who fought that day. Behind the scenes, Secretary of Defense James Mattis ordered a full review of U.S. operations in Africa. The aftermath of Tongo Tongo changed how America conducts missions on the continent, tightening oversight, improving intelligence sharing, and requiring air support and QRF coordination before approving future patrols. Still, none of that changed what those men did on October 4th, 2017. Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright and Staff Sergeant LaDavid Johnson were posthumously awarded the Silver Star. Staff Sergeant Brian Black and Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Johnson each received the Bronze Star. Their Nigerian partners were also recognized for valor. The men of ODA 3212 stood their ground against impossible odds, refusing to break, refusing to quit, and refusing to leave their brothers behind. Their sacrifice exposed failures that forced change in how America plans missions, protects its troops, and conducts operations across Africa. But beyond policy and politics, this story is about them. Ordinary men who fought with extraordinary courage. If you made it this far, thank you. My name is Matt, and this is the American Military Network. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, but they matter. Because remembering these heroes keeps their legacy alive. Every like, every comment, and every share helps honor their sacrifice and spread their story to new generations. And if you'd like to go one step further, you can directly support our wounded veterans through the Wounded Warrior Project. Just click the donate button at the top right of your screen. Your donation goes directly to the Wounded Warrior Project.
I don't know, bro. And America plans to go to Nigeria again. I hope it will be a different story if only they go there, bro. To the fallen heroes, may you rest in peace, bro.